Yeah, Kerry, give folks a little bit of a background on yourself, your career, where you live, what gets you excited, and how you got your way into a GTM leadership role.
Yeah, I think that I'll start with I fell into it. And sometimes I question why I did it, in the sense that I was living in Telluride, Colorado, and decided to move up to Denver. And sometimes you question, like, why would you stop being a ski bum? And I shake my head because I've had many fun nights with JP down in Telluride, with him and his family. That said, what I've done over the last, and it's sad to say, almost 20 years, is really built a sales career in both large enterprise organizations from McAfee all the way down to small startups. The MX Logics of the world, and the K2Ps of the world. So have seen a lot of different things, and what I've taken away from those experiences is just how do you bring scale and organization to your go-to-market. Whether you're at a large enterprise or a small startup, it's all around prioritization of your go-to-market strategy. And then fortunately or unfortunately have had to lead through challenging times, whether it's, change in leadership or change in control or economic downturns or pandemics, for that matter. And it's been an interesting ride. So have had some fun experiences and then learned a lot along the way. To your question about what gets me up in the morning, as I listen to my daughter sob in the background, my family does. And that's the joy of parenting, but also just being outdoors. I live in Colorado, so being in the mountains is something that's near and dear to my heart.
Kerry, we've kind of walked ourselves out of what could be a pandemic and into what could be more challenging times. And I know that we had a chance to work together during some of that time. I'd love for you to maybe share some of your both leadership experiences, but also what you saw from a team perspective too, and what types of challenges you saw, how you approached them, and ultimately overcame them.
Yeah, I think, in my experience, there's a couple of things, both if you take the internal lens and the external lens. So starting with the external lens and start backwards is, you build in good times for the bad times. And so what I mean by that is, like, the same strategies that you're going to use in a downturn are the same things you should be doing in the good times, and you're building towards when there is risks or you need to ask for favors. So when you're selling, it's always about building relationships. It's what you're trying, what their business problems are and their drivers, and making sure the why for them. And you build those relationships so that when you are working in more difficult times, they understand what you can bring, the value you can bring to their organization, and how to do that. If you take the internal lens, it actually was really highlighted during COVID of how to lead. Having been through, the housing crisis, and then the pandemic, and then, what we could be going into, in this coming year. What really fostered in the pandemic was transparency and execution. So really helping your team. What do they need to do on a day-to-day basis? How are they going to do that? And then also what's going on internally, and really being transparent about where the organization stands, what you need to do, and either, we're in a favorable position, or hey, there are going to be some challenges, and if we stay focused on our execution, we'll be okay.
About building up like some goodwill with your customers and or customers and your team. What are some of those fundamentals? Like what do you kind of think back to, like the good times of maybe summer 2021? What were some of the things that you can point to that you helped build out with your team or your customers?
Yes. So we'll start from the external lens. It starts with, the pre-sales process. So living to what you say you're going to do. So as an executive coming in and saying, I'm going to be your executive sponsor, they hear that all the time. Every executive steps up and says, I'm going to be your, ES during the pre-sales process. But what happens in month 2, month 3, month 4, month 10, 24, et cetera? And so making sure that you're building that continuity and you're checking in. It sounds very basic. But that's going to help them, help them understand that you're always going to be there. And I always find, like, even in struggles, whether, take the macro things out of it, but nothing's always going to be positive or favorable, meaning you could have a support issue, or there could be some other changes, whether that's changing control at their organization that they need some support on, and making sure that you're there, understanding how that impacts them personally, professionally, and their teams, and how you can help support, whether that's through other relationships or that's through, support of your business and their technology that supports it, will help to build that ongoing relationship. And also, sending a bottle of wine here and there doesn't help, or doesn't hurt. Anybody who knew me as a leader, my first time leadership role, I was a terrible leader, and I will fully own it. And it was because I wanted to be the person who knew exactly and would tell people exactly, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to do it, and was overly direct but not authentic. And that authenticity is the key word, is that even when leading through change or adversity, is being vulnerable and allowing people to understand that, like, you can be concerned. So when you bring up the pandemic, talking to my team, I was like, yes, we've never been through this before. This is new for all of us. But in my experience, here are the things that I believe that we should do: 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to communicate about the why we're going to make these changes, why I believe that these are the right changes. And then please challenge me if you have a different thought process and you want to take a different direction. And then let's just align to it. Whether we agree or disagree, let's disagree and commit and move forward. And then let's pivot if it's not the right move. And so, leading a large organization through was a change that you had to make so rapidly. Like in this experience and what we're doing with now, like, we could see some of the changes coming. In the pandemic, we had to pivot in a day, and we had to say, we're going to change. We're going to move from in office and remote to fully remote. We're going to have to change our communication styles. And guess what? Conga got acquired during all of that. And so we changed leadership. And what we did was, we just as a team came together and said, we're going to create an environment where everybody has a voice. It's really flat, but we're going to trust each other. But we really embodied, the 5 dysfunctions, which is disagree, commit, move on, and then pivot quickly.
It's funny. I hadn't considered it until you said it so succinctly, but yeah, the pandemic, it was like clear to everybody that the world was different, like right away, from customers, team members, your significant others, your family, everything changed overnight. In this moment in time, like, we know things are different, especially in like tech sales and tech go to market. But I like, one of the stats that JP was looking at was 58% of sales reps out there behind quota right now. And like, it just feels like that it's coming on slower, and it's not as pronounced. And sometimes people like aren't convinced that it's going to be lasting. I'm curious out there, like, how are you thinking about driving that urgency and getting that, like, hey, you can't do things the same, when it's not so apparent to everybody that things are different?
Well, but I think that if you empower your team in good times and in challenging times, it's not different. It's just different messaging. When people are in hyper growth mode, the messaging is, you're in high growth. This is what you need to do. You need to innovate your processes because you're expanding. When you're retracting, or the economy is retracting, it's how do you do more with less, but then also how do you scale for the future? Because we're going to come out of this in 12 to 18 months, and you need to be poised and ready. And the companies that are going to excel and are going to expand in this are going to reduce spend in critical areas, and in areas that are not revenue producing, that are not going to drive or poise them for the success as we come out of this. And so how do you switch your mindset to hyper growth, to retraction? And so from a team perspective, is don't be afraid. Still sell with gusto, still sell with that energy. It's just sell with empathy. So, companies that are retracting right now, they just lost colleagues, that they've enjoyed to work with. Those aren't easy decisions, but here's a way that you can make some critical decisions for your company that you have to right now, so you can continue to survive and then expand and grow and thrive. And here's the way I can help. So it's just changing the approach, changing the thought process, but always remembering it, like what's in it for them. How is it going to help, them as an individual, help to support those colleagues that they respect so that they don't have to have more, more attrition.
I love it.